So a couple of things. I actually have graduated with an undergraduate degree in printmaking. Thought that I would be really happy working a day job and making art on the side. And when I graduated, had the unique opportunity to have a senior exhibition. That's something that's standard with Grand Valley graduates. You got to show your work, surprise. That's what artists are supposed to do. So we decided that instead of having a show on campus, that we would find a space in downtown Grand Rapids, because I've always been in love with Grand Rapids, and have our show off campus. I had two other partners. We found a warehouse space over by the antique stores over on right off over by the Rapid station. At the time, there were no antique stores over there. We were kind of like at the forefront, you know? So we got a space. We were so excited. We walked in. We hadn't really been able to access the space. We had seen it once, and there had been some, there's a lot of stuff in there because the person was moving out, so we hadn't really spent a lot of time in there, but we were like, it's big, it's empty, it's in a warehouse. We're so excited. We got the keys, we walked in, we're talking about the show that we're gonna put up, and I walked over and I put my hand on the wall, only to find out that the walls were actually made of styrofoam. And we were not gonna be able to hang any work on those walls because if you put a nail in it, it's just gonna fall right out. And so they had actually, this entire portion around the outside edge was just foam core that they had painted white because there were glass windows that actually ran all the way around the outside edge of the space. And so we had already signed the lease, we had already given them all the money, and so we called up our friends, called up our families, put together any money that we still had in our bank accounts, scraped all the money out of the bank accounts, got a bunch of wood, found a bunch of volunteers, and we built walls so that we could have a senior exhibition, because we were committed. And we probably should have been committed. So we had 3 different artists showing in the space, and when we had the exhibition, we had an amazing turnout for a senior exhibition at Grand Valley because all of our friends who live downtown in Grand Rapids also came, and it was like magic, right? So I've been spending like a year making this artwork about pigs, and it was like, pigs are people, but people are pigs, and my roommates are pigs, but I'm a pig. We're all pigs, I don't know. It's like the madness that happens when you're a graduating senior from undergraduate. And so we had the show, but the turnout was really amazing. And for me, it really sparked something in terms of the idea that when people get together and they look at art, yours or somebody else's, doesn't matter. There's something really magical about that. And so as we were sitting there in the post-glow of having to clean up the next day, as you do, where all the food's sticky and left over, and you're like, that was a great event, why are we doing this today? We were talking about, what do we want to do? This was so magical, let's try and do it again. And so we ended up actually leasing the space in that building for a year, and running a gallery out of that space called Lo-Fi Project Site. And so it was a really interesting experiment on how to work collaboratively with partners that I didn't really have as much of a relationship with when I started. It was a really amazing opportunity to grow out and grow roots in the community and meet people. We used it to really bring together both students and practicing artists who were already established. So it gave us, as very young artists, this great opportunity to go out and introduce ourselves to people and say like, hey, I got a gallery, you want to show in it? Like, I've always loved you, and so we were able to bring people in and have shows in a space. And so we did that for about a year, and at the end of the year, I don't know if this says anything, but both of my partners moved to different places, but I stayed. And I started working with the DAC, which is the Division Avenue Arts Collective. I love hand drawing posters, so started a series. I did a bunch of different things with the DAC. For the first couple of years I was there, was doing shows. If there was an art show that was going to happen, I was on the art committee. I was helping to hang the shows, hang the exhibitions, and I learned that I really love working with artists, putting artwork on the walls, right? So that's when I learned, I love the install process. I like talking to artists about their work in that really intimate setting. There's something that you learn about the artwork as you're physically touching it, and you don't get to do that in a museum, right? So I'm one of those people who goes to the museum and is like, okay, I won't, but I really want to, but I won't, but I really want to, So if you install the artwork, you get to actually touch it, and that was really great and exciting. And then I started getting just excited in building community. So I started this thing called the Other Committee, and we were doing events about other things, right? So the intersection of where art and food meets together. And so at this time, this is one of the ways that I was kind of continuing to make work, and I've always been making work. So I still make work today. I consider myself a printmaker, even though I don't always make prints. I had like this wild fascination with ceramic work like a year ago. I just had to make lots of ceramics for like a year. And but right now I'm making gouache paintings. So these are some of my prints. I typically work in linoleum block. So that's a process where you carve into the block, you print it, you can make 100 of them, you can make 5 of them. And right now I'm just really interested in making small paintings about me cutting thorny branches off my legs and shit. So I actually have a couple of pieces that are going to be in a show opening at the UICA on June 1st as part of the Flex Gallery exhibition. I'm pretty interested in sort of just following my zen right now with my artwork. The liberating thing about not having your artwork be your day job is that you don't have to make it for anyone else, and you don't have to please anyone else with it. So for me, it's like therapy. Like, I'm not going to say I did not weep as I was carving some of these. And when somebody tells you you're weeping, it's weirdly emotionally vulnerable, and everyone's uncomfortable now. So we'll just move on. So I use my artwork as therapy. It's how I process my stuff. I think that sometimes oddly comes through. I didn't actually stick my head in a bear. It's an analogy about emotions. My family doesn't really talk about feelings very well, so I make art about it. Okay. So during the time that I was working with the DAC, started spending a lot of time on South Division. At that time, they were located in a storefront along South Division, and there's some really interesting things going on. The buildings across the street that had been boarded up, this is the view out the front of the DAC. If you looked across the street at that time, all of these buildings had boards over the windows. And we would be standing out front. I was an avid smoker at the time, loved Parliament lights, smoke them all the time, like pack a day. So I'd stand out front and I'd smoke and I'd look around. I love South Division, and the buildings were so beautiful. And I love the Hartside district because we're a historic district. We have just some of the most amazing buildings in the city. And so as I was standing there, I started hearing rumors that the buildings were going to be turned into these artist lofts. And I was like, that sounds really bougie. I don't know about that. How's that going to look? I'm not sure. Seems very premeditated. And then I went to a conversation, but I was still interested in having a gallery and working with artists. I went to a conversation hosted by the Dwelling Place where they were talking about this conversion of these buildings into live workspaces. And I saw pictures of the live workspace, and I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. And at the same time, I was also volunteering all over the place. So I was volunteering at the DAC, I was volunteering at the UICA, I was on a couple subcommittees for them. I was volunteering, I kept showing my artwork in a summer art market that was happening in Hartside Park, and I would show up and say, you know what would make this better? If people came. And I have ideas about how we're gonna get the people to come to the thing. Let's just make flyers and hand them out, right? And so I kept showing up and saying, let's do this stuff. And I tend to, when I tell this story to college students, I tend to make it sound like it was a little bit of serendipity. See, I said the word. So I kind of make it sound like I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, but the reality of the situation is that I was showing up and I was doing the work and I was being consistent. And I think that all of us know that that's what it takes when you're going to work in a creative field. You have to be responsive and you have to be responsible to the obligations you make. And that's what I was really doing when I was showing up and volunteering with the Dwelling Place. And I didn't know the Dwelling Place at the time, didn't know what they did. And so when I was offered, as I kept showing up and saying, you should do this, finally the person who was coordinating it just said, you know what, you should do that stuff. In fact, we have a part-time position next summer that's gonna actually be running this market, and you should come back and you should take that position. Pay is nothing, very little pay, but if you have all these great ideas, come and do those things. And so I got this really exceptional opportunity to start impacting some of their programming. And during that time, they had also started to convert some of those buildings into live workspaces. And so the conversion meant that at the time I came on board with Dwelling Place to help run the art market, by the end of the summer, the apartments were available to rent, and they said, well, we've got to now fill them with the artists. We've talked to the artists, we knew that they wanted, now we've built the spaces and we got to get them to move in. And I was like, well, I know all these artists. For the last couple of years, I've just been meeting artists. I've been doing all these shows. Let me help you find the artists to live in these spaces. And after a couple of months of actually showing the apartments to people, I ended up being so in love with the apartments that I moved into one. And I lived in one for about 5 or 6 years on South Division. And I think that there's something really unique and what a gift to live in a neighborhood that I would then work in for over a decade. And so for me, it was really a transformative experience to get to know the neighborhood on a level that I don't know many of my coworkers have had the same relationship with Hartside and with South Division. It let me really have an inside look into the struggles that the businesses have and the residents have, and also form relationships with people. That was really unique. And so while I started to showcase the live workspaces and take over some of the programming that had been started, like that art market, we started to try and bring those things together. So let's go to the next slide. So this is what it looked like prior to renovation. My boyfriend had actually, at the time, would jam in this building. So there's a long history of creativity and art along South Division. Some of it safer than others, right? This building had the most terrifying bathroom of all time in it when he was in there. And so today, go to the next slide, looks a little different. So this is actually, you can tell, right? It's like a Google Street View. And I'm proud to say that I've had a lot of influence in how that parking lot and the spaces around it have changed. We've done collaborations with WMCAT and the UICA Artworks program to create the artwork and murals that you see along South Division. And with the exception of one of them, I've helped be involved with the process of doing those commissions and working with the artists to create the artwork along the street. And so as the live workspaces were opening, they chose, the artists and community members came together and voted, and they chose the Avenue for the Arts title to represent that South Division corridor between Fulton and Wealthy Street. So welcome to the Avenue for the Arts. And this is a space for everyone. Our intention is to create a community where nonprofits and for-profit businesses and artists and residents all coexist, and coexisting, but not just coexisting, but are successful together. And that's a challenge. As you look at how cities and towns change as the influence of market value changes property, changes how people have access to the spaces that are around them. We know that there is a myth that artists sort of lead gentrification, right? I call that a myth. I know other people don't call it a myth. But I don't think that the artists living in affordable rate housing are the ones who drive up property values. I think that the creativity that they bring to an area, the inspiration that they bring to the area, definitely changes the culture of a place. But there has always been housing along South Division. Dwelling Place owns about half of it, so about half of it is affordable rate housing. We have about 300 units out of the 500 units along South Division are owned by Dwelling Place. It's affordable rate housing. So we have a unique opportunity here to spur investment, to create a dialogue between businesses and nonprofits to make sure that everyone is not just coexisting, but everyone has the opportunity to move forward successfully and measure that success in terms of community value, but also personal value, being a part of the neighborhood. So I'm just gonna ask you to kind of, from here on out, you can just kind of flip through the slides. So this is what it looks like when we add Avenue for the Arts over a built space, right? When we add a program over a built space, when we activate it, when you add people to it, it's a completely different feel. So I think 3 slides back goes from a like kind of an empty, caged-in lot with some overgrown trees, to then we add art, then we add people. And that's what the Avenue for the Arts programming does. It adds the people, it brings people out, it creates a dialogue for people. And one of the things that I love about it is that it's community-based and run by artists. The Avenue for the Arts programming isn't about making art. I just have to say, it's not really about the art. The art is the byproduct because we work with artists who are creative people. It's about building community, and it's about having people have a voice in their community. So many of our projects, so many of our activities are really about bringing together different groups of people, different size groups of people, and having them form relationships with one another. We really try to grow of the connection between different individuals, and we do what I call creative community problem solving. So when we have a space that's neglected or overlooked, we really try and think about how to activate it. And so one of the projects that we did really early on is we started a big quarterly art event. When we had all those artists move into the Live Workspaces, we said, what do you guys want to do? And they said, well, we're artists, we have art, we want to show it. So we said, okay, great. So we started doing a series of open studio nights. Those started first as quarterly events. We started with something called Spring for the Arts. Because we're Grand Rapids, we like to name things what they are. So it was in the spring, and there was art, so it was Spring for the Arts. I didn't name that, by the way. And we did that for about 2 years, and then what we were finding is that there were all these other creative partners who were having other events during that time. And their events were attracting just as many people, but we didn't want to compete for our audience, right? So if you went to the precursor for Site Lab was called Active Site. If you went to an Active Site event on one Saturday, we didn't want to burn you out by then coming to an Avenue for the Arts event the next Saturday. So we saw this really great opportunity to all be collaborating together, to have all of our events on the same night, and to really get Grand Rapids excited. Are you guys excited right now, right? So everybody was going to come out on the same night. We were going to do this big collaborative event, and it was going to be really, it was going to change the tone for downtown. And at this time, I wanted to say it's pre-art prize. So Grand Rapids didn't have an experience having a large-scale, community-based art event where people were going to come out and they didn't know what they were going to see. And so, the first year we did it, Active Site was kind of in a little building over here off of Commerce, tucked in. Nobody really saw what they were doing. The next year they were in the Ironworks building, and the Bob participated, and we were putting artwork in the Bob, and that was an interesting collaboration because the Bob had no idea what to do with this artwork that was Mark Rumsey was making these big paper sculptures, and he just happened to know the Gilmore, and he was like, can I put some sculpture in your lobby? And they were like, okay, and then they had no idea what he was going to show up, and he showed up with this big folded paper sculpture. So, so we started creating all of these events, and they started growing and multiplying, and then along South Division, the Live Workspaces would open up, and you could go into the Live Workspaces, and people get really inspired. We all know that when you get to experience and go into a place, this is why you guys show up for Creative Mornings, right? You're going to go to a place, you're going to see somebody that you've never met before, you're going to see a space you've never been in before. Something exciting can happen. And so we were really building that momentum, and as we started to build that first couple of years of Spring for the Arts, we realized that Spring for the Arts was kind of a lame name, so we decided to change it, and so we chose the name Art Downtown. And because we didn't want to name it what it is. It's art and it's downtown, right? And Art Downtown, it was it happens in the spring. Spring for the Arts, Art Downtown, happens in the spring. We would have trolleys that would go around to a variety of spaces. But at the same time that Art Downtown was growing, we were also having regular other additional events. So Avenue for the Arts, we actually have some educational programming. We work with artists in a variety of ways. Chris actually teaches a little bit of branding for us every once in a while. So we do workshops, we do classes. We do a doing business course that uses an entrepreneurial model for artists to really see where they're at and do an assessment of their business skills, grow some of those skills, and then also figure out where they don't have strengths so they can find somebody to collaborate with, right? Because we're not all accountants. When you have to add the tip for your beer on your fingers, like I do, you're not good at the math part, right? So we help artists kind of identify where their strengths are and where they could grow. And so we do that. Those were some of the very first classes that we started, but over time we've changed how we do them, and we've tried to change with the times, and we're trying to be very responsive to the community. So we do a big event called Break It Down, Make It Better. It's a one-day event in collaboration with Art Prize and UICA. Where we host artist roundtables, and all of the content, all of the conversations are drawn from the community. So we ask the community, what do you guys want to talk about? And when they say, well, we want to talk about insurance, we say, okay, we'll find a person to help you talk about insurance. When they say, we want to talk about pricing artwork, which is the mystical magic 8-ball of art, we're like, all right. And then 60 people will show up for a panel discussion about how to price their artwork. And so what we've done over the years, we've realized that some of our large-scale events, you're seeing, this is the iteration of the market as it is today. We're only doing one this summer. We're doing it in August. And during the market this summer, it used to be like 4 tents in Hartside Park, getting suntans, hoping my mom would show up and buy a print from me so I could eat dinner that night. So now we're on South Division. We have a variety of different artists and makers. We'll usually have about 40 booths set up. All of our live workspaces, especially those on the ground floor, will be open for a market first Friday. And then also we'll have live music. We have these really great dance performances. Everyone is different. Every market is different. Every First Friday is different. And so we launched First Fridays about 4 years ago now. And First Friday is not unique to Grand Rapids. If you go to most cities that have kind of a rich arts culture, they'll have some kind of First Fridays or Third Thursday or whatever. And so we just copied that idea from somebody else and made it our own. And when we did that, it was really because we wanted to have something that was consistent. I don't know about you, but I like seeing art. It kind of inspires me to make more art, and it inspires me to talk to people. And I truly believe that when you look at a piece of art, you find out something about that person that's profound and unique that you would never find out through talking to them unless you have the most intimate of relationships with a person. And when they tell you about their artwork, they might reveal something that they might not reveal in casual conversation. Because we're so West Michigan, we love to talk about the weather. How's the weather? Oh my God, it's gonna rain tomorrow. It's so cold today. We talked about this morning. Oh, it's chilly. Yesterday it was warm. We talk about this stuff. No offense, guys. It was a great conversation. But it's very Grand Rapids, right? And it's hard to get down to the nitty gritty stuff. But when you're looking at someone's artwork, they're gonna reveal something about themselves that you didn't know. So as an example, the artwork in the space right now, we always have a show during First Friday, and we feature different artists. And the artwork on the wall right now, they're all neighbors who live in the Hartside neighborhood. We always try and create a show. So some of these individuals, 2 of them were homeless before moving into the housing that they live in now. But this individual, Sarah, actually when she moved into her apartment building, she qualified because she qualified as having a disability. She had just gone through an eye surgery, and she was afraid, and the doctors were afraid that she was going to lose vision in one of her eyes. And so when you look at her artwork, she has 2 here, and then she has the little triptych over there in the back. As soon as she told me that story, I understood something about her artwork. I understood something about her that I did not know prior to her sharing that story with me. And luckily, all of her sight has been regained. But during the time she made these pieces, she was very vulnerable, and she was processing what her self-identity would be like if she lost vision in an eye. And I would never learn that about someone. And so I find it's a gift to work with artists on a regular basis and work with creative people on a regular basis and hear their stories. It's like the icing on top of the community cake, right? So we do all sorts of fun things during our events. We started First Fridays about 4 or 5 years ago. We've grown it over the time. So now our programming at any given time looks like this. We have a learning lab of anywhere between 4 and 7 interns who help to move the Avenue for the Arts programming forward because it's grown too big for me. And Avenue for the Arts programming is only one half of my job. So one half of my job is Avenue for the Arts programming. The other half of my job is all the other community stuff that Dwelling Place needs done. So I serve on a bunch of committees. I'm currently going to like almost daily meetings with the city of Grand Rapids to get more lighting along South Division. We work collaboratively with so many different groups. We're launching a new project in Muskegon, Michigan, in Muskegon Heights actually, and so how are we going to reach out to those neighbors there? And I help to manage all of our community engagement across all of our properties. In Dwelling Place, we haven't talked a lot about Dwelling Place, and I probably won't too much, but they're an amazing organization. They have over 1,200 units of housing across the West Michigan area. So we have stuff in Whitehall, Hesperia, Rockford, but 600 of those units are here in Hartside. So I'm lucky that they allow me to spend a lot of my time and energy bolstering and working in this neighborhood that is so near and dear to my heart. So we do all this work with the Learning Lab crew. This is my Learning Lab crew from last season. They obviously love it. Look it, they love it. And they're like, oh, Jen, this is like almost towards the end of the internship, so they're feeling very sentimental. So the crew comes together. We work out of this space. Every season, I get a new crew. and they really help to push the program forward. But the program is a vision of the neighborhood. So we have an advisory committee. The advisory committee is comprised of a couple of different types of groups. So we have residents and business owners from along the South Division corridor that attend. We have a couple of really dedicated volunteers who have been involved with the program long term who attend. And then we have lots of people who just drop in because they wanna get together. And that group helps to define how our programming runs. So they help to create things and steer the ideas for Break It Down, Make It Better. They help to make sure that when we started First Fridays that they were gonna figure out the best way to do that. And sometimes they're the boots on the ground. They go out, they connect with community members, they get everybody signed up, because when we started to talk about First Fridays, I was like, it's never gonna work. Every month we're gonna have to have shows, everyone's gonna be totally burnt out. How are we gonna actually get everybody together to do this work? And they said, if we can do it for Art Downtown, we can do it for First Fridays. We have enough people down here now that we can really build it. So they went out, they started talking to the building owners, and of course, I said, after you can get 10 people to sign on consistently for like 6 months, we will help grow that program and support what's going to happen with that, and keep steering it and promoting it and pushing it forward. And so right away, they get it. It's the done deal, and I've already committed. So we start building out First Fridays. And in the meantime, we're also always doing these different pop-up projects and activities. And so the Learning Lab really helps to push that forward. I help to steer it, but it's really driven by those artists in the community who are dedicated and involved and continue to push things forward. So this year we're in our 9th year of Art Downtown, and it's grown and grown and grown. What started as like maybe 20 different spots being open with maybe 20 different shows. We had this last year over 40 locations, we had over 60 exhibitions, and we have trolleys that travel around to all the locations in the downtown, and we really end up with something that's pretty spectacular. I mean, there's nothing more rewarding than seeing over the course of a day 1,000 people walk up and down South Division, because let me tell you what, it doesn't happen very often. And so we went from having it be an evening event that was 4 hours, very densely packed event, to taking it to a Saturday. So now it's a 9-hour event. And over that course of 9 hours, we will have several hundred people come through. The UICA will see well over 1,000, depending on how snazzy Site Lab is that year. They'll have a couple thousand people through during the course of the day. And over the years that it's grown, it's been really rewarding, because we get to use these exciting spaces. Like this is an alley along South Division that nobody ever gets to access, but we access it during Art Downtown. And people get to come in and check out the sites and the spaces. So needless to say, my advisory committee loves this event. So when I proposed that we do away with it last month, they were like, excuse me, say what? And I have to say, when Molly and I were talking about this ahead of time, we likened it to when your favorite TV show is at the height of its awesomeness and it decides to stop, because there's nothing worse than burning out. And we decided that we'd start a community conversation about what it would be like to get rid of one of our biggest annual events, our signature event, in fact, and try and do something a little different. And one of the reasons that I wanted to start that conversation with my committee was because, over the years, the things that have made that event so awesome and fresh could be incorporated now into First Fridays. And when somebody comes down for Art Downtown, they treat it, I hate to say it, like a little bit of a mini art prize. And I hear over and over again people say things like, this is so cool, you should do this all the time. And I say, we do. It's called First Fridays. You should come down. In fact, it's called almost every day down here for us. You should come back. But it's really hard for people to think about that branding and to think about that message. When they come down and it's a one-day only event, and it's the only time that they're gonna get to see this artwork, and they have to come because it's only these 9 hours or 4 hours, then it sends a different message than the message that I want to be sending about our community, and the message that I think a lot of our business owners want to send, which is we're here all the time doing this work. We're always accessible to you, and we want you to come out on a regular basis. So we're changing our tune. We went through the process. When I first presented that concept, everyone was like, nope, we're keeping it. It's a terrible idea. So I said, okay, well, let's make a pros and cons list of why. This is the real thing, because we just did this the other night, of why we should keep or get rid of Art Downtown. And so I kept this because I wanted to show you guys our process, right? Our creative process of going through and figuring out what are the things that we really want to keep, what are the things that we would do away with. And we use a fist of 5 for decision making because I'm a consensus model person, because I think consensus builds community, right? So it doesn't mean you're voting, it means that you're showing your support for something. A fist means, hell no, this is not gonna work. Like, put the brakes on it, like, and a 5 means, okay, not only am I down for this, I'm excited about it, and I wanna help push it forward. And so when we started the conversation, I had a lot of these, and by the end of the conversation, we had a lot of these. And it was because we started talking about how amazing it would be to have every First Friday feel like an Art Downtown. And that's gonna be a huge challenge. Luckily, we've identified target audiences that we would like to have come to these events, and one of them we call our ICP group, Independent Creative Professionals. Right? So on your chair, you will have found a First Fridays map. If you have not been to First Fridays before, this is your open invitation, face to face, because I know when you hear about it on the Facebook, it sounds okay, but you'd rather Netflix and chill, right? So what I'm saying to you now is, like, one of the things that you could do to really support the Heartside community and other local creatives is to come down, because we have amazing artists like Crystal. This is her piece about the Flint water crisis. This is a water filtration plant. This is the water in Flint, and this is her city that she came from. And so she's thinking about that, you know, a lot of the artists that work and live along South Division are self-taught. We have such an amazing variety of people from all different backgrounds making artwork. Art is always gluten-free, right? For those of us who are watching our gluten intake. Not me, I like pizza too much. But so there's a little bit of something for everyone. And we really hope that as we grow our First Fridays event, that when we make the sacrifice of giving up something that we all love so much, like Art Downtown, it's because we know that we're building a better future together as a community. So I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of a perspective about how the Avenue for the Arts programming came to be through telling my personal story, and how the decision-making process comes about when you have to make those hard decisions about cutting a program that you really love in favor of growing a program that's just okay. Because I think that as creative professionals, that's something that we're always doing all the time, is trying to make those decisions about where to put our energy and our effort to have the best outcome. And in my case, it's always to make the best outcome for the largest group of people that I can possibly impact. So I invite you guys to come down, hang out with us, check out a First Friday. You all have a map. It's a little bit of a key, because there's also always these pop-up activities that happen. Guiding Light reached out to me this week, and they're like, what do you think about praise bands in the parking lot and root beer floats? And I was like, I love root beer floats. Do that. You know, root beer floats sound awesome. Yeah. This is my boyfriend. I put that in there because I figured by the time this popped up, I'd be close to the end. You guys would laugh, and I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm close to done. So thank you. There you go.